Do you ever ask yourself, am I playing too small? Have I left it too late to start afresh? Will I come to the end of my life and feel that I somehow let myself down? This is your invitation to hear from some amazing people who have asked themselves those very same questions and chose to wake the F up, to get off the hamster wheel of mediocrity and seize the life that was calling them. Be inspired and be challenged to discover who you have the potential to become and the contribution you're here to make. And now, here to guide you on the most important quest of your life is your host, Janet Hogan.
What is most extraordinary about my next guest is not that she's written 9 books or homeschooled 4 active spawn, as she delightfully calls her kids, or that she's a qualified biochemist, founder of her own entrepreneurial venture, The 8 Gates, or that she teaches math and metaphysics in her spare time, or that she even has any spare time. What's most extraordinary about this human powerhouse is how her journey all began. At the tender age of 8, when she was struck by lightning and was initiated into the Thunder Clan, when henceforth she would be known by her Indigenous name. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome Janine Dancing Crow Bolon to Wake the F Up. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you so much for having me with you today. I can't wait to share what we both know.
Well, let's start with that moment. I mean, if ever there was a Wake the F Up moment, it was that point in time when you're 8 years old. Can you just share with us that experience and what door did that open for you?
Yes, I have to retract a little bit. I think I need to double check on my editing skills because technically I believe I was 10 or 11 years old, but that's okay. I was in middle school. Let's just say that, right? Sometimes I get messy when it comes to exact times of age, but I was either 10 or 11. I was in middle school and I was standing in my living room, and we lived on a small island in the Bahama Island chain called Eleuthera. And I was just listening to the radio, trying to stay cool. As anyone who has ever lived in any tropical environment knows, that sometimes laying on the floor in an all cotton dress is the best, coolest place in the house. And that's what I was doing. And I went to stand up, and a bolt of lightning came through the ceiling and struck the floor near me. And I went blind for several moments. It took me about 20 minutes before I got my sight back. And I remember that I was just surrounded by this white light all around me. And that is one of the attributes that is required by certain Native American tribes to be considered a sacred clown, which is the highest level or the highest medicine that can be offered somebody, is that you've literally been picked by the sky gods called awakens. You've been tapped and called into service to operate as a healer for the tribe.
Talk about a bolt from the blue. Now I know what they're talking about. That's
it's totally true.
Yes,
just out of nothing.
I didn't realize that they actually meant that. So what happened then? How did you connect with that experience, with even communicating it? Did you know local Indigenous people at the time? So how did they find out about what happened to you?
So it was going to be almost 40 years or 30 years, 35 years later before that event would be connected with a Native American tribe here in the North America. I have worked with Native Americans in North America and Central America, as well as South America now, but it would take almost 3 decades before I would be quote, quote, found by a Native American group and then given the indigenous name of Dancing Crow. But the time in between all that was my father was in the military. And so we were traveling all over the world. I was meeting all kinds of different types of people, learning all kinds of different customs and how the various ways that you honor the land, the moon, the tides, that sort of thing. And when we moved to Colorado, I was married by that point. I had children of my own. And I was starting, I meditated quite frequently, and I was starting to experience these visions, and I was starting to get ancient knowledge literally kind of downloaded into my head, and I had no idea the frame of reference that it fit into. And that was when a friend of a friend introduced me to a shaman. And when he arrived at my house, he was doing some ceremonies in the house and helping me clear out some ancient, well, I guess you could call them ancient energies that were confused. And anyway, after he helped me clear out the house, he turned to me and goes, "Have you ever been struck by lightning?" And I went, "Yes." And I've been having these visions, and I started explaining them, and people got very quiet. And a couple of the Native Americans that were present with him got really big, wide-eyed, like, ooh, and backing away from me. And I didn't know what was going on. And that was because there's a very specific area of training that only people that have been struck by lightning go through, because they are seen as picked by the thunder gods, picked by the Thunder Clan to do a very sacred work. And so they didn't feel qualified to be speaking to me about those things. So then they had to bring in a specialist, so-called, and then I was trained in that, and that's where my name came from. So it's a long story in the sense of a lot of time passed to connect those two dots of my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you share the kind of things that they trained you on, as someone who was part of this very rare group? I imagine there wouldn't be many people on the planet who have been struck by lightning and survived, correct?
Correct. It's this particular training with this particular group. Please realize, with many indigenous peoples, each group has their own sorts of training. And so I got my initial training with this one group that used very much the Lakota tradition. And so the name, the label that they give people like me are called Heoka. And it's a very specific sort of training. Well, what I didn't realize was that there are a lot of folks who, if you don't do it in a very traditional way, then you're not considered Heoka. So I was called Heoka by the spiritual beings that were summoning me to this calling. And so I always like to express that to people of, okay, so that's how I learned it, because I didn't understand the word that was coming through when I had these ancient beings chatting with me. They were using pictograms, like they'd show me a haystack and a big letter O, and then they'd show me a crow going caw. So I didn't even pronounce it right when I was first talking to some people of the Lakota Nation. I was saying, "What is this Heoka? What's this Heoka?" And that's why they kept backing away from me with their eyes really big, because like, what else have you seen? And I had all the necessary markers. So I don't want to say that I was trained in the traditional way. So I don't label myself as Heoka because of that need to keep that purity, but I was labeled that by others. And so I am a sacred clown, but I'm not in a traditional sense, because then my calling, after I got that training from the Lakota tribe that I was working with, there are 15 other tribes that introduced me to their ways of handling the medicine or the energetic gifts that I had been gifted. And so it's not homogeneous, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Depending on what tribe you go to, like I was finding out, like one tribe found owls to be very sacred, but I went to the next tribe and they wouldn't allow me to use my owl wings or my owl fans in ceremony because they were considered wrong. Like, they were an inappropriate bird. So there's a lot of, you have to know your audience, so to speak.
Yeah. I can
You have
see
to
that,
know
yeah.
the tribe that you're going to. And so for me, I don't like to use a lot of labels, because depending upon what the tribe needs is the gifts that will manifest, that I will bring to it, depending upon their paradigm. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. That's really fascinating. And then even stepping back from that, the broader context is that you describe yourself as that you were a recovering Catholic. So what was it that you felt you'd been taught in the Catholic idiom that didn't match with the Indigenous one? Where did there seem to be a misalignment?
Well, I teasingly say recovering Catholic, but I actually had to walk away from the church at age 18 when I was told by a well-meaning priest, gosh, the Catholic Church and their priests, they get busted on all the time, and I don't want to be a part of that. I'm not saying
No.
it that way. I see that the divine being or source energy put that priest in my life so that I could do the spiritual work that I'm supposed to do. So please don't think I find anything negative about that priest. He was doing what he felt was right, but he accused me of being a witch because I couldn't, like, I was having these visions, and I went to him in confession and I was like, I'm having these visions, Father. I need help. I understand mystics have these type of visions, and I need assistance because I was having beings show up and give me information and ancient knowledge. And he said, because I couldn't prove to his satisfaction that it was an angel or that it was Christ or that it was a Catholic saint, he was in fear for me that something was going wrong because he was trained in Ireland. And so he was an Irish Catholic priest, very dyed in the wool. So I had to walk away from the church because I knew I wasn't an evil person. I knew I was not seeing evil or experiencing evil. I was experiencing things that felt better than anything I had ever experienced on planet. So for me, that's where I was. So I had to walk away from the church when I was quite young, 18, and I started seeking a different path. And so that was part of that couple of decades before I was introduced to the Native American. So I wasn't practicing Catholicism, but I always honor it as a foundation because people can say what they want to about the Catholic Church, but you have to remember when we use the words devil's advocate, that comes from the Roman Catholic Church, because in order to prove their saints, they had a church authority that would act as the devil's advocate, making sure, are you sure they're really a saint? You say there are miracles, there was somebody there. And so that's why we have all the history that we do for the saints and mystics that came before us that actually were manifesting some pretty intense spiritual gifts in their day. And so I always honor that history because that's what kind of started the thirst that I had for a one-to-one communication with God. And that was actually my purpose, was I just wanted a one-to-one communication with God like Moses had and Joshua and all these guys in the sacred texts that I was reading. And I wanted a conversation, dagnabbit. I didn't want just signs and wonders. I didn't care about a burning bush. I wanted to hear the freaking voice of God.
Yeah. And so you walked away from the Catholic Church, but in a sense walked towards God. What happened?
Yes.
Can you, it seems like probably the most cliche question to ask anyone, how do you define God? But I'd love to hear that from you, Janine. And how does that communication, or that dance, as you describe it, a divine romance, tell us about that.
So I never could quite accept God as having a form. So that was a challenge for me because I have thoughts and I have reason and I think, and that gets me in trouble. And I just could never accept that if God was omniscient and omnipresent, I don't think, and I use he because I'm feminine and I like the thought of having a he to balance my femininity out. Okay, so I say he. For people who feel they need she, no problem. But he, I felt had to be formless. And in my spiritual meditations or what have you, I never really sought the source out as he. I sought source out as a love that passed and went beyond understanding. So some people say the word unconditional love, but to me, I felt those were also barriers to God or source, because I knew that what I wanted was beyond words or labeling. I had read enough about mystics and I had read enough about other folks who had become enlightened, is the Eastern terminology of the word, that when you connect in with source, you lose your vocabulary. And that's quite true. That was the experience I definitely went through. So that was the walk I moved toward. And I did that because I knew all the definitions that I had been taught didn't mean anything to me because I had not experienced God in the way I had seen and read so many of these other mystics having seen and experienced God. And they would use words, but I knew there was so much more depth there than anything a sacred text could give me. So when you ask me about what is my definition is I remember all that I am. That is my definition of God, is that I remember all that I am, because our soul is running around in this beautiful, cute little three-dimensional avatar, but our heart chakra is still very much connected in with all that is. And so that's kind of a term I use, all that is. It's the best way I know to describe that universal constant that is the unconditional love that we all can channel should we choose to. Yeah.
So how do you, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I mean, talk about wisdom downloads. I'm sitting here, my mouth isn't exactly agape, but I'm just taking it all in. I'd love to know what your day-to-day relationship with that force that we call God is. How does that manifest for you, Janine? Is it an overall feeling that's beyond words, or is it direct communication as in messaging and guidance? How does it show up for you?
Well, one of the things that I highly recommend with folks is that get rid of the word God. God has been so overused, and there are so many layers and filters on it. So find your own better word, your own personal better word. For me, it's source or unconditional love. Sometimes I use, it depends on the person I'm around, but source is usually the one that I like best because I know that I'm still connected with source. Now, how does it manifest and how does it work in my day-to-day? Anytime that I have an emotion that we label as negative, I know I am disconnecting from my source, because the energy of that negativity is my source, my understanding, my wisdom, my connection telling me you're getting off track, come back into alignment. And I say things in terms of, I don't look for balance in my life. I look for harmony, because to me, balance requires energy and force to keep it in homeostasis. There's constant energy that's having to be put into it. It's exhausting. Trying to live a balanced life, it's exhausting. Trying to have a balanced meal, exhausting. You're constantly.
You're thrown into the world of analysis, aren't you? And comparison and duality and disparate elements. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Exactly right. Perfectly said. Yep. Whereas harmony, you can have 15 people on a stage singing and it's beautiful. But if you have 15 people on a stage talking, it's horrifying, right? It's just chaos. So I always go for harmony. And so when it comes to the day-to-day, how does this manifest? I'm always saying, what will make me feel better now? All right. What will make me feel better now? What will make me, because our world is in a state of chaos as we try to adjust to the new dynamic that we are being presented with. And it's very easy to get into a state of anxiety. And I'm being affected by that too. Just because I have a connection with my source doesn't mean I am impervious and not being affected by the world dynamic. That would be ridiculous. Even the great masters, even the ascended masters, talked about they felt grief when they lost their mothers. They felt grief. Even if you're enlightened, you're going to feel the emotion. What is the difference between an ascended master and somebody like ourselves? Well, the difference is the speed with which we move back into harmony with our source. Right. And it takes practice. The ascended masters, they got it on lock. They were able to experience the emotion of, say, grief or tragedy or, oh my gosh. And then they were able to get into harmony with source fairly quickly and reminded themselves, you are the watcher of the reality before you. right?
Mm.
And they were able to move into that state of being watchful of, or some people call it mindfulness. Some people call it the watcher. I prefer watcher to
Yeah.
mindfulness because mindfulness puts me in my brain, where
Yeah.
watcher allows me to disassociate from drama and trauma that is
Mm.
happening in front of me. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah, I love the reframe with harmony, because it suggests to me, when you said that, what I saw were all these strands, like instruments in an orchestra. And then when you notice, almost like the conductor, where you're creating that separation, there's a discordant note. You go, oh, and I love that, what you said, what do I need to do to bring that harmony back? Or maybe the discord is good, maybe it's a note that works and it's about acceptance, but it feels much less anxiety inducing when you put it that way.
Yeah, harmony is easier,
Yeah,
right?
because
Especially, it's very easy to be in harmony with somebody. Like a conversation is harmonic if you allow it to be. Everybody's going to have a chance to speak. Everybody's, you're a very good interviewer. You allow me to move in. And if somebody, like I'm speaking and somebody cuts me off, I just am like, no, they're just really excited. They're highly engaged in the car. They jumped in because they're like, oh, before I forget, right? And some people, and I remember how my parents were always like, stop interrupting. You're being rude, right? Whereas if some people interrupt me, I'm like, I just grin because I'm like, they're engaged. We are engaged. We are having a very co-creative harmonic moment. And when I interrupt other people, I always go, excuse me, sorry, I'm trying to be rude, but and there's something I want to share with you because I'm engaged with you, right?
Yeah.
And so so that's the way of reframing. Your entire reality can be reframed from old paradigms that no longer are appropriate for your personal life. And so every individual that's listening to this, it's like, you need to reframe for you. Don't take my reframing. Don't take Janet's reframing. You want to reframe your life for you and realize that some of the stuff that you were taught is just out and out wrong for your path. It was totally appropriate maybe when you were ages, 8 to 15. But after that point, or where you are now, maybe you're 62, that programming that you were given needs to be totally and completely cleared from your system because it is not serving you anymore, especially if you need to move forward in your life in a very specific way. And you know that in your core. Yeah.
Yeah. Janine, you mentioned before about the chaos that we're feeling at the moment. Can you speak to that? Just explain your take on that, where that's coming from and why we're feeling this, why there's a growing sense of anxiety. It's interesting. We can kind of pinpoint it to issues like the climate crisis and go, yeah, that's why I'm feeling anxious. Is that really where it's coming from?
Well, anxiety is your ego trying to create drama, and you don't necessarily need to listen to it. Okay. The ego likes to feed on pain. The ego likes to feed on suffering. And so the more dramatic your life is. And so one of the things you have is a mystic. Now, my definition of a mystic is anybody who wants to evolve their consciousness. I don't care where you're starting out with. I don't care if you're not meditating and you're learning to meditate, whether you consider yourself a newbie or you consider yourself a 20-year veteran. It doesn't matter to me, you're a mystic because you're trying to improve the world through your own inner work, right? So bravo to you, 2 thumbs way up, good job. Keep going. We need you to evolve. And that's really kind of what's happening with this planet is that mankind will evolve, or humankind will evolve its consciousness, whether it wants to or not. And you can see the extremes that are happening. And there are people kicking and screaming, wanting to go back to the way it was before. And they are throwing an absolute hobgob fit, trying to get somebody to listen to them because this is not right where we are. And they refuse to accept that this is the new normal, right? So for those individuals, they have an emotional default setting, if you will, that they have at some point in their life thought that the more negative I am and the more I throw a fit, I'll eventually get my way. And that's the ego. And I don't blame anybody for this. This is how we're hardwired. We
Yeah.
come in to this planet with that. So realize where those folks are. They have never had a situation that hit them from all areas of their life. Every single institution, every single area of their life is demanding on them to evolve. And their ego is like, if I stay miserable enough, long enough, eventually I'll get my way. And that is, as we all know, a very self-destructive cycle. And so that's part of the anxiety is then from that. Now, on the other side, you have those people who do not operate in that default setting. They have a different default setting, which is they really have care and compassion and understanding for others at the expense of their own forgiveness of self, compassion to self, because they've been taught it's wrong to be selfish. All right. So they are the givers. They're the ones that are the caregivers. They're the ones that will almost sacrifice everything for others, totally and completely forgetting to take care of themselves because it's wrong, because that's being selfish and self-serving, and I'm not going to be that. So these are the empaths that we have. They can actually walk into a room and they know if a conversation is going well or if the conversation is quite bad. They can tell just by walking into the room. And so they're the ones that pick up on anxiety because everywhere they go, there is conflict because you have those people who are trying to stay negative so they get their way back to what they think is normal. And then you have these empaths that are being affected by that, trying to bring comfort, trying to make people feel better. And all they do is stir an even more high level of conflict going on.
And I'll just jump in, Janine, if I can. Are they also coming from a kind of egoic position as well, unwittingly?
Well, I don't know if I would call it that. I like to call that more programming or training.
Yeah.
You know, they've been trained that it's selfish to do whatever. And so I honestly can't say. I don't feel confident being able to say it that way. But some people could call it that. But I don't like saying that to empaths because empaths work so hard not to be egocentric. They're so outside of that to say that it was an ego-based would do more harm than good for that particular personality type.
Yeah.
Because they're working so hard not to be the negativity that they see expressed in front of them.
Yeah. I'm maybe I'm thinking of myself here, but I can veer into a space of self-righteousness that doesn't feel healthy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering if that's living in Bali, we see a lot of this too. It tends to attract a lot of people who might have you think that they're more evolved than you are. You know, we get into a kind of spiritual Olympics over here on this little island.
And let me assure you that Source loves us all equally.
Yeah.
So when somebody starts talking about how they're more evolved than someone else, I look at them and say, you don't understand motherhood very well, do you? Because a mother will love the child that has mental challenges just as much as the child that is an athlete and doing wonderful scholarships, just as much as the stoic scholar, right? So I have 4 children and they always like to say, which one of us do you love best? And I look at them and I go, come here and I'll tell you. And I'll go, all of you. That's not possible. And I'm like, love is not pie, right? Love is not a piece of pie that the more you cut it up, you're not going to get less, you know, love is more than that. So, so anytime you see somebody in a self-righteous attitude about anything, I always say the same thing that Mother Teresa did, which is mind your own business. That's that person's issue. That sounds like a personal problem. Our job is not to walk around judging others. And that judgment is yet another way of the ego to express itself so that it can feel safe. Because if I judge somebody else, then I can feel better about myself. Well, that's not that's part of the programming, but that's not where you as a mystic is going. And so when I catch myself having a moment of, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not them, or however it comes through my head, the watcher of my brain goes, well, isn't that interesting that you would say that? Because, God loves that person just as much as he loves, or God loves, source loves that person just as much as you, because the love is given to all equally. Without reservation. And what happens is we shut off that faucet depending upon how judgmental we are, how negative we are. And the more in harmony we are with joy and peace and contentment and appreciation, the more love we feel and the better our reality is. Yeah.
So, Janine, if someone's feeling that they can't achieve that inner harmony, it's almost like there's an inner tug of war going on between, maybe what they feel about themselves and who they're trying to be, and they can't get any kind of reconciliation. How do you achieve that? What would you say to someone who's feeling that way and it's resulting in maybe they don't have the confidence to move forward? They feel stuck in a state of inertia because there's part of them that's constantly pulling them back and keeping them small and fear-driven. What do you say to someone like that who really wants to know, well, how do I how do I achieve this state of oneness? Do I have to wait for that bolt from the blue, or could I do something? Could I take some kind of action?
I pray to goodness that no, you don't have to be struck by lightning for that. No, first of all, give yourself a break. The world is going through an unprecedented, in modern history, an unprecedented event. So number one, you are alive on planet Earth, and that is saying something right now. I mean, this is an incredible time to be alive. Now, your labeling of it's good or it's bad, that's what's causing the hiccup, in your life. And so say you had a good friend die, or you find yourself in grief and you're just really struggling. The very first thing I like to share with people is I always go when I find myself really down and I'm trying to pull myself up with positive thinking, it just isn't cutting it. Okay. The one side of my head is really, we're going to look at the sun and say, ooh, the sun's shining. I have that little voice in my head that likes that wah, 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 back at me. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll go and I'll sit down, I'll take a couple of deep breaths, do whatever breathing techniques you were. Sometimes just taking a couple of deep breaths is all you need. But you sit for a moment and then you say to yourself, what can I do to feel better right now? And I know I already said that, but honestly, that is my affirmation, if you will. I mean, people use mantras and affirmations. Those never really worked well for me. Yeah. They didn't work for me. But for me, saying, what do I need right now to feel well? And I'll wait for an answer. And it is so funny. Sometimes the first thing that comes to my mind, I actually revolt at the idea because I don't want to. But one time it was like, what can I do right now to feel better? And I was like, get your shoes on, put on your coat. It's negative 15 degrees outside when this happened. And I'm like, I do not want to go outside. It is freaking cold out there, right? And I was like, all right. So I bundled all up and I went outside, and it was just so cold when it hit me. It caused me to kind of almost go into not a state of shock, but really like that level. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. And it triggered a memory. I remembered a long time ago that when it got this cold, that you could throw a bucket of water out in the air and it would freeze before it would hit the ground. Wow. And so I ran inside and got a bucket and I threw it out there, and yes, it went into ice before it hit the ground. And I'm telling my kids, hey guys, come here, you got to check this out. And they went outside real quick and we did the same thing over and over. Well, it took me the rest of the day, and I was sitting there in bed or, getting ready to go to bed that night. And I realized, oh, I got myself out of that bad mood because I was triggered by that memory that I would never have had I not listened to my internal intuition that was guiding me to how to feel better now in this moment. Now that's kind of an extreme, but I like using that story because it is extreme. Sometimes I'll say, what will make me feel better now? And it's like, go make yourself a hot cup of cocoa. And while I'm making the hot cup of cocoa, I haven't even taken a sip of it yet. The phone rings and I'm already in a better mood because I'm making a hot cup of cocoa and it brings comfort to me. And somebody calls me and the next thing I know, I'm totally out of my bad mood. So
Yeah.
that's the way the universe works for you if you will give it an opportunity to speak to you through your own inner voice. But you have to quiet yourself so you can hear that voice.
Mm. I look at such practical advice, and I love that because it's so easy, I feel, to marginalize people who appear to have, to have very strong intuitive self, that they don't have down moments, or that every day is joyous and every sunset is to be loved. And so it's great to hear that you get into these moods, and it's kind of reassuring because then it starts to minimize this division between us and them, the evolved ones and the rest of us. I remember at school, I was always a little bit offended when there was this club called the Crusaders, who were the ones who God had chosen, and then there was the rest of us. And I thought, that's not fair. Why would God do that? Janine, I'd love to talk to you about this book that I believe is in the works called Creating with the Divine, Making a Life with Your Spiritual Gifts. Is it possible for you to give us a little bit of a taster on that one, a little bit of a preview of what that means and how people might achieve that? Because I feel that's the holy grail. Can I actually make a living in this material world and get food on the table and, have sufficient income that I'm not worrying about money all the time, doing what actually fills my heart? How do I do that? Can you give us a little bit of a download on that, Janine?
Okay, so this is near and dear to my heart because over and over again, as I ran into various mystics, they all said the same thing. I want to do this full time. This makes me feel good. And I talk about how you can do that in the book, and it's still in the writing process. So I'm actually going to be giving you a link if you want to share that with your readers where they can become beta readers. And I actually, I'll start typing out chapters in January with the purpose of having the book ready in February. And so every chapter I write, they get a little email and I'll say, hey, can you look over the chapter? And then they can actually help me co-create the book together. Like if I don't answer questions and stuff like that. So I love working with beta readers while I'm writing a book. So that's an opportunity for them. But as far as giving a little bit of help here and a little bit of encouragement, it is totally possible to make a living doing what you want to do with your spiritual gifts. The challenge is that if you put up too many barriers and fear factors of it, you won't ever get there. So you were talking to me, and when you were asking the question, you were sharing, okay, so is it possible to do that when you have to pay the rent, you have to do this and you have to do that? And I'm like, wait a minute, why are you assuming you have to pay the rent? Well, because I'm paying the rent now. Well, that may not be the case when you actually understand your spiritual gifts. You may be gifted a place to live for free. So stop putting that limitation in there. There's so many assumptions that are made, and you were eloquent and very graceful when you said them all to me. And I picked out 4 assumptions that you were making just in the question about how do you go about doing this? And when people say to me, but Janine, we all have to pay rent, or we all have to pay a mortgage. And I went, no, there are people on this planet whose houses are paid off, who are traveling to their 3rd house in some other place on this planet, who need somebody to take care of the house while they're gone, and would love for somebody to be a house sitter, and you can be there rent free. So there are options available to you, but it's going to take some expansion. And before the universe cracks open your head and hurts you, which it won't, there are a lot of assumptions that you have to walk through first before you get to a place where you could receive the opportunity to do what you want to do, spiritually speaking.
Right. Yeah. So is that almost like a show of commitment?
Commitment? I don't understand.
So you're saying there are certain things you have to do before the universe will give you what you need to.
No. The universe will give you what you need right now.
Right.
The problem is you being able to recognize it because you're still looking at reality with these programs in your head. You still have filters on your eyeglasses. So it's like the Wizard of Oz. When they went into the Emerald City, everybody was fitted with green filtered glasses. So the city was the Emerald City because everybody's running around with green glasses on. That doesn't mean the city was green, right? I remember when I first started reading those books, I was like, oh my gosh, do these people not catch on? But then I saw what the story was really about. What are the filters that you have on your own opportunities that you don't see because you don't think it's possible? You're wearing colored glasses, and I was one of those people too. And there are still days where the universe will show me something and I'll go, oh, looky there. Yeah, I'm going to have to change that little paradigm in my head. I'm still every day a new worlds are opened up to me on things that can be done and how they can be done differently.
I like the comparison with glasses because it also speaks to people who might have a tendency to wear rose-tinted glasses as well. In other words, the cure for self-doubt is to be optimistic or to write affirmations. And I find that's equally limiting as well. It's almost like we want to try and find a clean lens, right? A clear lens that's not tinted in any direction.
Go ahead. The biggest thing, since you brought up rose-colored glasses, which, by the way, was something that I was teased about unmercifully most of my growing up, was that I had rose-colored glasses. And I used to say, hey, I like my world. I have a great time in my world. Anytime you want to come over, you can party with me, right? But rose-colored glasses, let's talk about positivity for a minute. It's one thing to be sitting in a situation that your brain is telling you is not good. Okay. And get yourself out of that situation if physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual harm may come to you. Okay. So there's that aspect of it. You've got to put yourself in a safe place. Now, let's say you're in a safe place. You are not going to be harmed physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually with where you are in that space. Okay. That's when you need to be the watcher and see how are you labeling your experiences because maybe your spouse, your companion has an affair and leaves you for this person. And it's the worst thing that has ever happened to you in your life because you have been a rule follower and you have done everything according to the way you're supposed to. And this person is supposed to stay with you for life because of the vow you were given. And they didn't. Right? So let's just talk about that for a minute. Worst thing that ever happened to you in your life. Where positive affirmations and journaling come in is you take that and you say, how is this the best thing that has ever happened to me? Your ego will fight you on that. And it will say, how dare you? How dare you say that this is the best thing that ever happened in my life? And it will try to go off into its trauma and drama. Stop it. Don't allow it to do that. You say, there is a silver lining here. There are gold nuggets of wealth and knowledge that I'm going to get from this. What are they? And you will start writing and you will start to see how it's the best thing that happened to you. And it's one of those things that it's an old psychological, or I think it was Carl Jung that originally came up with it, to twist something around on its head like that and say, how is it the worst thing that ever happened to you? How is it the best thing that ever happened to you? And it really causes you to harmonize very quickly then with your source, because your source is like that. Your source is like, look, nothing has come to you that was meant to be hurtful. It did. It wasn't meant to, but everything that has come to you, if you take responsibility for it, then you can create a solution to get yourself out of it. And that's why the universe is trying to encourage you to always take responsibility for everything that comes to you, not because it's your fault, but because the most powerful place for you to be is in the present moment saying, there is a solution and I will find it. And you do,
Yeah.
because you have that positive outlook. So this is a little bit more on that rose-colored glasses where it's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. That's I love that. It suddenly puts you in a place of gratitude too, doesn't it? And if you can be grateful for that event, then life is a series of wondrous gifts, isn't it?
I get excited. Can you tell? I'm impassioned by this. But I actually had a person that had been molested when he was quite young. And he was the one that really showed me, like, I thought my life was bad. This guy had his own drama and trauma. Okay. And when he was telling me about his experiences, he goes, so I did that experiment of turning it on my head. How is being molested as a young boy the best thing that could ever happen to me? He goes, sat there and I looked at that and I went, I have a lot more compassion for people than I could have ever had with it. And he listed off, he showed me his journaling pages for that. And he was only able to list 3 things. But he goes, those 3 things are the core of my personality, to where I defend those that are weaker than me. And it was really a beautiful statement to him. And so it can be pretty extreme what's happened to you. And I'm sorry you may be going through whatever it is you're going through, but I also want you to know that at some point you're going to be tired of being either a victim or being powerless. And in order to step in your power, all you have to do is start focusing on, how did this become the best thing that could have happened to me? And you remove yourself from the drama and trauma that the ego is trying to keep you in that very miserable place. And you move into a more positive place, because what has happened is you've aligned with Source, and Source will give you all the power and will give you all the resources you need to find the solution to move forward into a better and a happier place for yourself.
I'm going to have to listen to the transcript of this, or watch the transcript, or read it. And there is so much wonderful information in here, Janine, and I love that exercise. It sounds obvious, but that's the genius in the simplicity of it. So thank you. I'm going to sit down as soon as this recording's over and apply it to a certain aspect of my life. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Time for the Magic Triangle reading. So if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with this exercise, the Magic Triangle is a way of quite quickly narrowing down to just 3 things, the things that you feel in your life you need the most, that would make the biggest positive difference to your life right now. And they come out as in a triangular formation. So there's one at the top, which I call the core need. And then at the base, there are the sub-core needs, third and second core needs at the base. So Janine, when you did this exercise, what came up for you at the base of the triangle was delight and self-expression, and floating to the top of your triangle, bliss. So I'd love to explore that with you. I'd love that combination. It's just kind of yummy. I'm feeling goosebumps even as I talk about it. Can you tell us first about delight? What does delight mean for you? And why did that come up as one of the top 3 out of about, to put this in context, maybe about 150 choices?
Delight, because I didn't come to this planet to deny myself anything. I came to this planet to enjoy it in all 5 of my senses. So my favorite beverage is coffee. My favorite food is pie. I absolutely love fruit pies. Okay. So I came to this planet to experience all the varieties that all the different types of fruit pies can possibly grant me. And so when I eat it, I'm in a state of absolute delight, because I'm sitting here eating it, knowing this is the only planet in all of the universe that has pie, and I'm sitting here eating it with a cup of coffee and I'm swallowing it down. And so for me, life is a delight. And so, yes, we have a lot going on in our world right now, but by God, it is not going to deprive me of the delight of being able to sit and chat with friends, even if it's on Zoom, drinking my cup of coffee and eating pie, because I came to this planet to be in a state of delight.
I love that. And thank you so much. And I love how you brought it down to something very real and tangible. It made me think, yeah, I have delight in my life too. My husband makes the best durian ice cream. I don't know if you've ever tried a durian. It's a fruit that's suffering from a bit of schizophrenia, I think. It is a fruit and it can taste sweet, but it also leaves a garlicky aftertaste. In fact, it smells so intense. The smell is regarded as quite obnoxious. You're not allowed in Asia to travel on a plane carrying one of these fruits. But I just adore the ice cream. And it's the one thing I'll binge eat and I don't feel guilty about it because I just love it. So thank you for that, reminding us about the true essence of delight. What about self-expression? Can you tell us about what that means for you, Janine, self-expression?
Well, for so much of my life, I was told I was too loud, too noisy, talked too much, did too much, needed to calm down, slow down. It was like I constantly felt either through society or my family or something that I was always too much, too, T-O-O. I was always too, just fill in the blank with a noun, right? So for me, self-expression is so very important. And so that's why I write. That's why I interview other creatives. I want to support creatives and mystics as much as I can, because I feel like a lot of times our self-expression is downplayed or ostracized or not even acknowledged that it exists. And so self-expression for me is about being able to take that divinity that I know exists in every person on this planet, and then being able to give them a forum or opportunity to express it. Well, in order to do that, you must lead by example. So that's why I lead by example.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That makes so much sense. And then the next one, at the top of the triangle. So this is like the cherry on the cherry pie, right? Bliss. Tell us about bliss. I know this. We're talking words, and words are limited. We're working with containers. I understand that, but in the vernacular of words, how would you describe bliss for you, Janine?
Being able to live each day where I take a few moments and just stand in awe of what has been created around me. So sometimes it's a sunrise. I'm very lucky. I live in Colorado. We have the Rocky Mountains in front of me. And so I have anywhere from 11,000 to 14,000 peaks that I can look out to. And that puts me in a state of awe every day. And my children tease me unmercifully about this, but I will be sitting there and we'll be driving down the highway and I'll see the front range of mountains and it looks like a postcard. It's just so perfect. It looks like it's been photoshopped, even though I'm looking at it in real time, and I'll go, oh, and we live here. And they're like, oh my God, Mom, can you just bring it down a couple of notches? And I feel I have done my job with my children. I have either embarrassed them or I have made, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's a state of bliss, is living in that total and complete appreciation. It's not gratitude. Gratitude is different. It's living in total and complete appreciation, being in awe that you're alive on planet Earth and it is good to be here.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So let's now look at the meaning behind all of this, what the and this is for anyone listening, what the triangle can teach us. And it's kind of uncanny. I have a funny relationship with triangles. I just love them because they're so solid and immutable. They're fixed. So this triangle, which of course is an upward pointing triangle, is kind of made possible. The thing at the top is made possible by the solidness, the solidarity, if you like, of the foundation. So what the triangle is saying, it charts the path, if you like, and it's saying that through delight and self-expression, you achieve a state of bliss. So in other words, and I know you absolutely know intuitively your path, but for those who aren't clear on their path, what it's saying is that follow this path. So the first mission, if you like, if say in your case, Janine, is to focus on delight. Okay. Well, how do I bring delight into my life? What does that look like? And you describe that cherry pie coffee moment. So it's little small things, things that are quite specific that add up to a pleasurable life. So delight first, and then self-expression. So now that we're in a state of, life is beautiful and it's punctuated by these delightful moments, I want to express myself in this environment. I feel like expressing myself. And then through that self-expression, because something is being unleashed in you and heard and it's landing with others, you can now hold space and just see how blissful this existence is. Does that make sense? Do you get that? Do you see that sense of journey?
Yep, totally made sense. I enjoyed the exercise. I thought it was a lot of fun. It gave me confirmation. And that's something as mystics, it never hurts to get confirmation. And that's why I enjoy learning from other mystics, how they go about working their life paths, how their spiritual gifts manifest, because I learn from them and they almost always confirm what I already know about myself. But gosh, it is so good to hear that you are on the right path, because, it can get a little confusing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very thankful for my background, because I didn't appreciate it so much at the time, but it was advertising. And the goal was my favorite medium was a billboard, because you only have 3 seconds to impress on someone a message that will stay with them. And when you think about it, that's usually just a visual and some kind of caption and maybe a logo. It's very, very simple. And so for me, the scariest point in advertising was when I started at this agency and they said to me, Janet, come up with an idea, just make sure it's an effing good one. And I went, oh my God, where do I start? And I looked at the blank piece of paper and I went into a state of uncreative freeze. And so I thought, well, maybe what we need, maybe this is a mental thing more than anything, is just some structure to attach to, so that we've got something to work with. When we say to ourselves, what do I need right now? To have something to work with, not just a blank piece of paper, almost pacifies, the worried mind and allows our heart to express. That's my take on it. So coming from the desire to keep things very simple. The other thing that's interesting about this exercise, Janine, is what I realized fairly recently, actually, is that when I looked at many, many combinations, it seemed to also work this way, that when you fulfill your inner self, when that, whatever that yearning of the soul is, when that is fulfilled, that is basically when you're really in a state where you can put yourself out to others, and share those divine gifts. And the gifts, there's a lot of parallel, because when you spoke about, being a child and being accused of being too this and too that, and having that self-expression quelled, it's almost like the need is created by the pain of lack, of having something that is within us taken away. And so because of that, this then becomes a source of passion. This thing that was once a source of pain is now my passion. Now that it's fulfilled in me, now I don't want others to suffer the same way I did. So this is my gift to them. And so how that works is it also gives you your why, what, and how. So the why is the thing at the top. Why you get out of bed ultimately is to be in a state of bliss, to know that is out there. That's the thing, that wonderful alpine postcard that you described, that appreciation of life, to not regret it, to actually appreciate what you're seeing in front of you and enter that state of bliss, is a pretty good reason to get out of bed. So let's say that's the why. And then the what you bring to the table, what you give to others, is the gift of self-expression. Does that make sense? So self-expression is really what you're enabling, and you actually said this, you jumped straight there. You have to find it in yourself first, and that way you can enable others to find self-expression in whatever form that takes. And then the how is through delight. And it's showing up in a delightful way, which you do. You are a delightful person. And so that's very attractive. And also helping other people find delight in their life. So it's not, I was watching a very interesting series on Netflix yesterday called Midnight Mass, which is all about Catholicism. And all the pain and the suffering that this particular antagonist in the plot was inflicting on her parishioners, trying to teach the word of God, but doing so in a way that made everyone feel miserable and chastised. And, so no one was going to mass. And I see you in quite the opposite way, that you bring delight to the table. Your modus operandi is delight, and that's a very attractive thing. So thank you for taking part in that exercise.
Well, thank you for your confirmation. Like I said, it's very comforting, and it's nice to know. Good, glad it's all coming through, because you have those days where you think you're a lone voice in the wilderness with the wind taking your words from you, because there are sometimes your best efforts don't land well, and you just have to keep trying. So thank you for confirmation.
That's my pleasure. And I'm going to I'm just going to finish now just by asking you, Janine, just to share whatever you feel is the most important message that the world needs to hear right now.
Stop doubting yourself. I think that's the most important thing, that when you quiet yourself, you sit down, no matter what kind of chaos is happening around you right now. And everybody's in a very different place. Some of you are hungry. Some of you have not had enough to eat. Some of you have not had enough sleep. There's a lot of things going on for a lot of people. Just know that when you sit down and you quiet yourself, you will get answers to your most pressing needs when you calm your mind and you play pretend like you're a cat and you're watching the mouse hole. And the mouse hole has mice that come out that are thoughts. And if you can watch your mind long enough, then the mice stop coming out of the mouse hole. And you can calm the mind to a point where you then can allow and receive your own best guidance for how to move forward. And that is probably the best thing that you can do for the entire planet. Because when we start living in this very conscious way, you can't help but be a positive force in this world. You don't have to do more. You don't have to be more. You just need to harmonize with what already exists within yourself.
Janine Bolon, thank you so much. I've just loved this conversation to bits. It's just been a wonderful conversation, and just to hear what you know pour forth, and like you say, have things reaffirmed, but learning new things as well. It has been a delight. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Janet. I really relished being able to do the magic triangle. I thoroughly enjoyed the exercise, and I was like almost giggly because I was like, I can't wait to see what happens. So thank you for creating a tool that mystics can use. It's a brilliant tool.
Thank you so much. Well, and I keep mine. I do mine every 6 months or so, and I keep it on my wall. So I look at it just so I stay on my path, and it never seems to fail me. So thank you, Janine.
You have just listened to another enlightening episode of Wake the F Up with Janet Hogan. To find out more about the breakthrough guided way to get off the hamster wheel and seize a life of freedom and fulfillment, visit janethogan.com/podcast for access to the show notes and to learn more about Janet's breakthrough work. Just remember, finding your true path isn't potluck, it's a process. Until next time.